Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 41 and the seventh show in this series, Our Altered Histories. Tonight, my very special guest is SunBow TrueBrother, who is the author of the book, The Sasquatch Message to Humanity. So tonight, SunBow is joining me in this series, Our Altered Histories, because the messages that he received from an Elder Sasquatch had a great deal to do with our lost history that goes way back to the beginning of as she was birthed here and life forms began to develop on the planet here. So SunBow is going to be joining me and talking about a story that is within his Messages to Humanity book and how that story interrelates with the other people who have also come on the show and are coming into this series of shows here as a point to bring together our varied messages that we're receiving about our past. So we may see slightly varying different perspectives on how our history played out in the past. But when we're looking at memories within us, DNA, junk DNA, that goes back multiple millions of years. Obviously, we are going to have many different rounds also of reality playing out. Time is cyclical and begins again, as I even read through this story that is within the pages of this very remarkable book, which I highly recommend everyone reading because it's so informative and a beautiful message to humanity. That there is an ongoing story of as divisions come on and the characters come onto the scene, there is one goal in mind, and that is to get back to this central message of uniting humanity. And what I found very interesting here is that SunBow's book talks about also these extinction events that have taken place. And as other people have come on and talked about potentially natural resets as well as events that have taken place because of misused powers at different times, we have to kind of blend stories of reality taking place where there is a lesser functioning, imbalanced group of individuated consciousness that tends to fall into the lower underworlds. And in a way, I want to explore even the characteristics of these characters that have played out and how it is that they become so fearful of being back into the inner circle of life where everyone is equal and not above one another in a hierarchy. So we're going to be exploring those stories today and a little bit about my guest, SunBow. He was born in Montreal in a French-Canadian family with Métis ancestry. The first native legend he ever heard when he was 8 years old from his brother, who had heard it in camp, and it was about, I may be pronouncing some of these incorrect, Wawaloo, a derivative of Babaloo, as the hairy forest people are called in Maine. He had never before heard the word Sasquatch back then, but it was only a few years later, in his teenage years or before teenage years, that the Patterson footage came on the TV screen with other revelations such as Von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, which awakened his interest in star people, hidden archaeology, and paranormal phenomenons, which raised the questions that his Christian and academic education were not able to answer. So before he turned 17, he left for his first tour of Turtle Island, North America, which became a pilgrimage in search of spiritual understanding. He went through churches, temples, ashrams, and connections with Mother Nature. In that first fall, a medicine man he met instructed him in undergoing a vision quest, during which he encountered his first spirit guide. Although he didn't understand what was happening then, he felt deeply that native ancestral teachings held many answers. So the following summer, he went to his first rainbow gathering, which began this great opening of his heart to a universal family. So I welcome onto the show, SunBow TrueBrother. Hello, SunBow, today.
Hi, thanks for hosting me.
You're very welcome. So what I'd like to do, SunBow, in beginning with this story of the messages that you received from Sasquatch. First of all, I do sit here as someone, very interesting point that at the time when Kelly and Kiwan, is that how you say his name, Kawani, were beginning their web page on Facebook, I had woken up in the morning with a dream about two Sasquatch, and I had not been involved with reading anything about them in any of the spiritual literature I had been reading about. So I've been a very predominant seeker for the last 20 years. So I have been exploring everything, but I hadn't gone into Sasquatch and those levels of what, those parts of our ancestry or other species were. And I woke up and two Sasquatch were what appeared to me were chasing the dream. And they were a red-haired and very large. And I was scared because this was a first encounter. And I ran. And what I did was I was hiding behind poles that were all set up in a TV formation. So I got up then, went to the internet and explored. And here, Kelly was just beginning her page about Sasquatch right at that time. So it seems that these memories got triggered in this communication all around the same time. So I find it very, very comfortable to understand this communication and how this in different dimensions of reality. And as opposed to us even needing to go into any of a conversation regarding whether this is real or how it's all happening, my focus with this show here is to look at this remarkable story of the history that goes back, I believe in the pages of the book, it said hundreds of millions of years since the earth began being birthed here and life form started. So central to this story, just to do a summation, we have star elders, and then we have lower lords, which is also a big grouping of any factions within any type of species when from center and source. And I'm, playing with everyone and playing fair. Let's just say it that way. So those two larger groups, and then or groups within these groups, and then you have ant people, well, fish people, and lizard people, bird people, Sasquatch, and humans. As currently, as you have seen within the pages here that were communicated to you, were unfolded. So can we first begin with the star elders and who they are? I wrote down some questions to ask about things that intrigued me. Can we talk about the formation of them and how in their space that they're occupying, working with the evolutionary program of souls evolving. How I got a little confused with them sometimes needing to protect themselves here, but not having incarnated and being more ethereal beings. So can you begin with the star elders and telling us about, as you've received the communication, how you even feel about it with, your feelings and impressions and understandings in there?
Sure. There are many classes of star elders, many different levels of evolution, many different histories and different timelines they have. There are for a race like us, let's say, to become star people, we first need to reach the level 1 of civilization, which is planetary civilization, which is to be able to live in peace with our planet, to harness its energy without destroying it, without polluting. From that stage, we can start thinking about moving to other planets. Once we made peace with ours, that's the very first step of becoming star people. Then from that also requires to go beyond the materialist science we're kind of stuck in today, to go into the interdimensional understanding of the universe. Because to travel through space, we need to travel through time and understand the different dimensions, what some would call antimatter and dark energy and all that. That are beyond the linear time we're in the physical plane. So that's where we're on the brink of getting there as a planetary civilization, if we can only become peaceful as a overall species. From there, there is a second level of civilization, which is a stellar civilization that can harness the energy of its own stellar system, again in a non-destroying way. And from there, the third level is a galactic civilization. And that level, the civilization can harness the energy of its galaxy, which also allows to travel to intergalactic travels. The civilizations that are at that level, they coexist because they can be in the same galaxy. So they learn how to share this energy and not to fight over it, not to compete. So to come to that level, they have to have some peace agreements, some collective body of authority that represents their various civilizations. Once they get there, they usually very evolve conscious, spiritually, because we can't get there by mechanical, materialist means. We have to evolve to interdimensional understanding, which is also opening us to infinite consciousness, to understanding eternity, understanding our true selves and our higher selves. That allows us, that is necessary to move on to other civilizations that evolve. So from there, we can call them Star Elders because they have evolved for millions of years, most likely more than we have as humans. So they have not only very advanced technology, but they have very advanced knowledge and consciousness, spiritual consciousness. What elders do, whether in the tribe or in society, in the greater picture of the universe, elders are taking care of the younger ones. They give example, they give teachings, guidance. They might intervene if something's going wrong, but they're not there to control or to order. They're there to guide and direct towards order, towards this cosmic order that makes things harmonious and peaceful and beneficial for all. So that would be the first level of Star Elders when people reach the stellar civilization. But it's only the beginning of a much longer evolution. Once beings start joining this, what has been taught to me and presented as a council of Star Elders, they're the ones I work with, interact and receive guidance from. I have asked many times, where do they come from? And they tell me they come from more places than I know, most places that I don't know. But they are all together in maintaining the cosmic order, the balance in the universe, and which include watching over the soul evolution of individual as well as species, as planets. So the whole purpose of this journey, this existence, is evolution to higher consciousness, returning to our higher self, our eternal self, and basically bridging this dimension, the division or the split that our ego has evolved through, which was necessary and part of our evolution to understand division, to understand suffering and all these things. That's why those themes are recurring in our existence, whether it's wars or violence or kind of energies that we'd rather do without. But there's also a greater purpose that once we learn to transmute and heal those energies, then we can help others to heal them. That's when we become elders, spiritual elders. So the star elders are civilizations that have gone through what we're going through, but long ago. They probably had nuclear wars and transgenic and transhumanist agenda and all these things that now we're going through. And they learned, in order to survive and to become star elders, they had to learn the best way out of it. They have to learn how to keep in balance with the existence of these technological concepts.
Yeah,
so there are also star elders, though I would say they have not gone through the cycle of incarnations. We could say, some people could say archangels or gods or spiritual beings that have not become mortal. And those are usually the ones who preside, because there's no hierarchy in the circle of the Star Elders Council, but there is a certain order. For instance, the eldest elders, the ones who have had much more longer evolution and learning and developed a closer connection with the oneness, the consciousness.
Yes.
Those beings are definitely have a certain guiding or presiding role.
Can I just tell you that your camera is bouncing a little bit? I'm not sure. Every when you talk, there's a little bit of bouncing taking place. I'm not sure if you help that. Okay. Oh, that answers exactly the question that I was having. So when we look at star elders and throughout the literature, the book here, that the reference to it, there's also different stages of development within becoming a star elder, and then there's a different order as we're also looking at this big picture. Okay, that makes more sense. So we're sometimes maybe looking at them in a semi-ethereal state and then a full ethereal state at different times throughout here. Okay, that helps with the reading and understanding that very much. Okay, so I found it interesting that these star elders there then watched the the birthing of the earth and then the earth forming, about beings in the story here as proposed by the Sasquatch that are much older than the earth herself. And as it is seen that the earth consciousness and developing this plane of reality is actually in an ethereal state herself for some period of time. I found that also very interesting and fitting into other creation stories about the cosmic egg story and how everything starts to form on the inside. And so they are observing then and waiting until they can come in and begin to formulate life. So I found that they were taking in the formation sense. Sort of my thinking previous to that was that Mother Earth is birthing all of these out on her own, but there is a level that operates in an intergalactic, the star elder groups that watch the formation of a new planet, and then they come in and offer their imprint. When you were talking about them being in their ethereal state, so how do they imprint a form when they are in an ethereal state? So one of the first forms that comes in is when it's ready at a certain stage, they work with fish people. So it appears that the earth herself is doing her own evolution of birthing forms, and then they come in and bring in their higher consciousness to some of these forms. Did I understand that correctly? And can you talk about that then in regards to the fish people and mer people?
Yeah. The planets are created to as grounds of evolution for souls to be able to incarnate. We are all interdimensional beings. We are multidimensional, I should say. We live in a multi-dimensional universe. We just tend to forget because we're incarnated in this planet, and our consciousness gets used to this limited reality. But the life on the planet is evolving in an orderly manner and a well-planned process. There's maybe some random occurrence, but the overall process is has a purpose. It's monitored. When star elders, Star Nation, become able to travel to other planets, and they find one that is suitable for life, or that has primitive life on it, well, it's normally a natural process to, we could say, colonize, or at least bring innovations, bring development on that planet. And one of the main way, well, it's to import or implant new DNA, new species that will help develop the ecosystems, and on a higher level to implant an intelligent species that will help the soul evolution. So that's why intelligent, sentient, spiritually conscious beings can have all kinds of different forms. They are usually humanoids, as we call, like head to arm to feet. It's not an absolute rule. Consciousness can be take any shape. just like they don't have to be mammals like we are. They don't have to be the, have necessarily two eyes, or they can have all the different variants. The purpose of it, so that's when the astronomers do when they come to a planet. They look at what type of life is there, which one is the most evolved and suitable to implant intelligent consciousness.
Okay.
What they do, they use their own genetics with that genetics, whether it's from water animals or insects. They take the dominating or the main genetic stock available and use this to speed up the evolution of consciousness by putting their own DNA in a species. They create a hybrid which become somewhat their ambassador on that planet, their connection between that planetary physical world and their star consciousness. So we are one of those. We're not the first one. There's plenty of proof of that. Archaeology, geology. There's a lot of what we call out-of-place artifacts. Our advanced technology found in fossils or geological deposits that are hundreds of millions of years old, just like there are pyramids and there are gigantic ruins, carved mountains with faces that are found all around the world that are much older than human civilization. And very sometimes they're under the ocean, or they're under the glaciers, like in Antarctica, or they're under the deserts. They have been there for hundreds of millions of years. We also have a lot of fossilized footprints, human-like footprints. I saw some myself that are usually bigger than human, that are dated 200-300 million years. So there is plenty of evidence that there's been a civilization on this planet long before us humans were here, which makes us, connect the dots that there has been some elsewhere too. There's been people coming and leaving this planet for eons. We just forgot that intelligence can take other shapes than human. We believe if like, let's take the Sasquatch. They look like hairy and wild and big and strong, so we would normally, our own Darwinian reflex is to think they're inferior. They're less evolved. They must be an ape or primitive hominid or something, because we have our materialist science cannot conceive that there can be intelligence higher than us. We think we're the top of the evolutionary chain, and if we take a religious perspective, we're the crown of creation, like the cherry on the sundae, and that was it. But maybe the cherry came from a tree somewhere, and that tree had produced many cherries before us, and it has roots. So the last cherry on the sundae is not all of the story.
Yes, definitely. We have talked in different shows about the fact that there have been Titan-sized humanoid type people here, and definitely giants. I did have someone talk about the megalithic sites around the world, from the polygonal stonemasonry way back, and also to the caves and the underground systems. And then when I found your stories here, that started to help to answer when you were talking about ant people. the fact that we have all these smaller, even underground cave systems that don't appear to accommodate, our height. So we definitely have been looking at the fact that across time, our geological history here definitely states that we have had different scales and different levels of development take place and then move on somewhere. So according to some models that have been conceived here is that we go through not only extinction type large catastrophic events, both natural, some like a cleansing type event, and also maybe some formulated resets that happen from the negative factions that interfere with our development, but that we move through stages of years going through an iron age to a bronze age to silver and into golden age. And they've proposed that in the golden ages, more of the divisions between the different planes of reality are easily traversed. So we can more easily become a unified planetary system, and that we are all moving into right now, about to move into an evolutionary leap, which we can see everyone is having these awakening experiences into more of a bronze age. And at this time, then these negative factions do sort of have to move out to, because we're going up, but yet they're trying to bring as many consciousness individuated, aspects of soul's spirit with them into their control systems, while some of us are evolving up into, what you're talking about, a more ethereal type state, which seems to be on the next evolutionary stage of where we go from here. So very fascinating that all definitely fits in. Now, so a lot of people are talking about, let's say, well, let's just stop and look at mermaids. I don't want to get ahead of myself and bring in too much from some other topics that will be talked about in other shows, but mermaids and the fish people. So part of the first development here, and why we have the symbolisms in Disney fairy tales, the Little Mermaid, and the stories about mermaids. When you talk about there being, first of all, fish people, are we looking at this in relationship to what the Dogon tribes talked about, or are we talking about there actually being a more of a formation of a more humanoid type fish being? So obviously we're looking at a representation of them having scales, a humanoid type. So can you have a description of that? Is this what was life like on our planet when it was this first development of fish people and mer people? Can you describe what we maybe, I mean, and looking at, some of us obviously have those genetics in us, correct? So we carry in our junk DNA all of the memories, I would imagine, of whatever maybe has been here as a collective whole. However, we are, utilizing this particular form at a certain time. I really like how you brought out the information that, we are these different forms as a human, but at this time, but we have these different species through us in order to experience human. There is also a good way to have this soul evolution happen in a positive way, but it also gets interfered with, and lower level species also can come in. But let's go back to what life would look like if we were in the fish people and mer people stage.
Yeah. Every hybrid that was created on this planet, let's cover this long enough, because every other planet has different stories.
Okay.
It started by, in the liquid phase when the earth was covered with water, which was actually a very thick soup of molecules. The land was barely starting to form and emerge. There was a lot of water beings of all kinds, starting from bacteria and algae to all over to fish, octopus and seashell and all that. So when the settlers started to decided to implant their DNA on Earth, that's what they had to choose from. Of course, the fish, the evolved fish, were the most evolved. So they created fish people or mer people that, but because they existed for so long, for longer than any other hybrids that followed on this planet, they have had time to diversify in a very vast range of shapes and consciousness levels and civilization. Some have stayed more close to the animal kingdom, some have turned into civilized beings that were well known with the days of Atlantis, for instance. And all around the world, actually, there's reports and drawings of their people. They're not all, like I said, they're not all like half fish, half people like we see. Most often, they're. I mean, if you do research, you kind of see some kind of different types of mermaids that were found out amphibious beings. They don't always look like a princess, they can look like different species. They can have scales in their skin. They can have palm webbed hands. I had one sighting once on a place that was known for it by the natives. And it's nothing close to human, but it's very intelligent. It looked like an amphibious being, the amphibian, that you're from intelligence. So that showed me that those beings, I mean, there's many types of beings on this planet or below our feet that we have no idea. That one time, the next day, I saw that head come out of the water. We dove and we found a pyramid at the bottom of the lake with a rectangular opening that was going inside with cold water coming. So there were, like the natives knew about it. There is a still probably being living there, been there for probably longer than we have, and that very rarely interact with humans. The natives have a few stories, but they stay away usually. They don't, because every species has their own karma, their own issues. Neither totally good or totally bad. Like us humans are a benevolent or malevolent species. It depends very much what perspective you look at the person who's altruistic and helping out, we're good beings. But if we look at the destruction and the wars and all that, it can be really evil too. So we cannot judge any book by its cover or any being by its DNA, its appearance. There are some reptilians, some greys, some that are benevolent, that have worked on their healing and their soul, and they're helping it. Why we often refer to those two groups, because they're the two most often observed by contactees, by experiencers, the reptilians and the greys. And we know also that they have been involved with the government secret programs that are not being evolved for another, manipulating. But does it mean they're all like this? It's like our human governments are involved in this. Does it mean all humans are? So we have to be very careful in, not to judge by the cover. There are certainly bad greys and bad reptilians, just like there's bad humans. But there's certainly good ones as well. So, well, to come back to the fish people, the water people, they have just developed in all this range of possibilities, basically, because our incarnations on this planet are the creation of a hybrid species, especially, is a soul evolution experiment. It's giving free choice to intelligent beings and the capacity and means to transform their environment can have all kind of results. It can turn it into heaven or hell. And it seems like every species goes through both stages of that, because we need to know the extreme to find the balance and then to understand our purpose as caretakers.
Oh, wonderful. Very interesting. And so as time goes on, then we have the introduction of the ant people. And interesting, I have read Native American books where they, during vision quests, talked about meeting ant people under the ground. And you talk about them having gone underground. And but it's interesting because it seems like this, once the ant people are here, then all of a sudden we have some problems coming up with wars seem to have come in about this time frame. And of course, that could be as an offshoot from, going through the Mer people stage, as someone had kind of proposed different rings of life coming out of Mount Meru from the middle, in a sense that once we have one center ring, that center ring, then when a new species comes up, that center ring gets pushed out a little bit more and sort of potentially then creating a different plane of reality. And in the choice, then those beings within the fish stage maybe have a choice of where they are going, and but they can either move up into a different type of experience and stay towards center, or they're going to be a little bit more in a devolution frame of reference in their existence. So it seems like when there's this second stage of development then, and the ant people come in, it began to sound like kind of like, the McCoys in the Hatfields fighting over a long period of time. And it was such an interesting read because it was literally all of the same replication of types of situations we have going on right now, just repeating itself again at this time frame. So when we're about to rise in consciousness, this heaviness from the factions trying to keep us down, and then the threat of potential catastrophe around us all at the same time. So the ant people then come into existence. Now, you describe this also as having passed through millions of years, maybe even you've said hundreds of millions in the book. Looking at this taking place in shorter epochs of time, or 24,000 year epochs with this, you're talking about hundreds of millions of years of development. And so you are referencing then that on our physical Earth here in 3D dimension, then there is actually created a hybrid species of the ant populations that were here becoming an ant people with higher consciousness. So are you talking about them as we see in pictures, that they go to an standing upright position and then they develop from there? And certainly I have heard other people reference in their deep metaphysical studies and explorations in different astral realms of meeting with ant type people, species who were very far advanced. So I would imagine then that there are, if we went to a Star Elders meeting, we would see fish people there, we would see mer people there who have reached the Star Elder positions. But then going back to, so can you maybe tie this into the fact that we have all of these underground caves going very, very deep. And I am aware also that we have civilizations being built upon one another. So we definitely have underworlds. But can you describe this process? So when they come here, is the ant a smaller creature or is it a larger creature already? And then it slowly, with the added DNA, becomes an upright and steps out. Even though we still have ants here, there's a portion of it that steps out and becomes humanoid type. Can you describe that to us?
Yeah. The ant people, or insect people,
Okay.
are the next most seen humanoids after the greys and the reptilians.
Okay.
So there's many reports of them, not always ant, sometimes mantis, or different type of insect, evolved insect. What the ant people were created to basically for terraforming, to shape the lands, the mountains, the caves, and to develop collective social coherence, so civilization from a collective point of perspective. Because the ants are all working for the hive, basically for the community. They do their duty and they don't have much individual choice. So that was perfect to have like an army of people dedicated to building the lands and developing biodiversity by implanting different plants, genetics, or insects, pollinizer that will help the ecosystems. The dog basically a whole world inside the earth crust. Below our feet, there are plenty of discoveries from around the world, in Europe and Peru, North America, everywhere that they find those tunnels that are made. Very often they're square in shape, and there's underground cities and whole civilizations that have left those remains. And very often, I mean, over the millions of years, it's possible that some of those places were occupied by humans, but they had been there long before. There's other species that live under the ground, well, the extraterrestrial. With the ant people, they were, because as every species or civilization comes to a stage of enlightenment and perfect harmony, and then there's decadence and downfall, and So, which often start with competing, fighting over resources or territory. So the ant people went through that, and it's a long story that is in the book. I won't go into details, but it ended that they built this moon that we see now. This is sounds like far-fetched for many people, but the more you look into it, it's been since the 50s, 60s. Scientists have been saying the moon is hollow, that it doesn't behave like a normal moon. It's always showing the same face to the Earth, although it doesn't spin at exactly the same speed. It's all mathematically impossible. It's 400 times this closer than the sun and 400 times smaller, so it's exactly the same size on Earth. All these oddities, without counting all the photos and footage from structures on the surface of the moon bases. Even the Chinese rover now has been sending a whole bunch of photos of bases on the moon. All these things add up that, yeah, the moon is an artificial ship monitoring the Earth. Even Linda Moulton Howe has done some very deep research with whistleblowers from NASA and NSA and all those guys. They know about it. There's actually human activities on the moon, but we can't get there without the aliens. We can't go there and do what we want if we're not allowed or permitted or asked to be there. That's why we don't hear about missions on the moon anymore. They don't even address all those photos showing bases and geometric structures. So it's the information is out there. So maybe it's a big change of consciousness to realize that, wow, this beautiful moon, some culture call our grandmother and everything, because it plays a important role on all the water, the tides, the emotions, and everything. It's a very strong magnetic pole, but it's most likely it's controlled. It's a ship. So the ant people, that's why there are also plenty of footage showing spaceships along the moon. So the ant people live there as their main base now. They're still underground too, but the underground's been invaded by others like the reptilians. So there's kind of a pact or an agreement made that, well, they can be there. And they still come on this planet. That's why the little grays, that most reports will tell you exactly the same thing, is that they're drones. They're like biosynthetic life, silicon-based life that are controlled by artificial intelligence. So they're basically pretty much close to soulless beings, or they don't have much of an individual soul. They can, that's why they have little emotion, but they can have some. Well, those were the creation of the ant people, right? Their continuity, because they have faced so many mass extinction events that they came to this conclusion that, well, maybe if we create synthetic drones that don't need air, don't need water, don't need food, that are much more invulnerable to radiation or to poison, all kind of thing, then they can survive. So we cannot judge, that they went through this failed evolution, because right now humanity is planning the same thing.
Yes.
They want to synthetic drones and implement our consciousness into some computer programs like that. Whether or not it's going to work, we'll see. But it's a phase of evolution that species might face when they feel they're near mass extinction, like we are.
Yes. Yeah. It seems like everything is amped up with their plans very quickly. Now, the moon that in the story is presented in your book is that this was placed here because a different moon was destroyed previous to that, and that this was needed in order to keep biodiversity taking place on the planet. And I found it interesting. They were, if I remember correctly, saying that your book was saying that it took a very long time to build this moon. So they were hollowing out, or they were digging the earth in order to create this moon. So now, so we'll accept that as, you know, a part of it. I think it said that it was, I thought it said maybe in millions of years they were building it. So maybe there is some kind of an experience that takes place. I was trying to logically put that into place in my mind, to have a plan where you were building a moon for millions of years, but maybe even in hollowing out land or something, you know, and there is some kind of an event that creates this moon. Now, as far as how we have introduced the moon in different places to kind of merge all of the stories together, it seems that some people talk about the luminaries in the sky as just being reflections or luminaries of a different plane of reality. And you are speaking of them slightly with a slightly different reference, but still applicable in the same way, because it has to be a sort of a time travel in order to get there. You have to pierce veils in order to go on to this other plane of reality, this other realm, this other dimension. And certainly what we see could even be a reflection of something else. So there's so many potentials for what we're looking at, but still you're talking about a different plane of reality and a consciousness that's functioning there at this time. So then you also had talked about the development of scalar weapons and electromagnetic frequency weaponry. And that is part of what is being discovered looked at right now in a lot of this mud flood information, and looking at old photos, that it appears that a lot of the warring that we see and the unusual images in there more refer to electromagnetic weaponry taking place. So in our history, first of all, too, we can look at this as this we are looking at here, even within your book story, this one whole big picture of a repeating story that takes place, and the fundamental characteristics are all about the same. So that's very interesting to know, because it helps us to know at what stage we're at, and you know what is upcoming next. I think it's a very good memory for all of us to understand that we haven't just discovered. Obviously, they have sound weapons and you know, sonic weapons, as you referred to, and different scalar weaponry that could destroy the planet. That's a little obvious that can take place, or destroy a plane of reality or sections of reality, etc. So the ant people in your stories in the books seem to have quite a few different struggles with even their underworld than being invaded by reptilian beings, or as you talked about it, lizard beings. And I really like that you did talk about the fact that each of these species has its portion, it seems, of those individuated consciousness who are evolved, and those who are devolving and staying a little bit longer in lessons. And you know, I found it interesting that as soon as we had a second ring and, you know, a different species coming in and new life forms, well, that in order to get accepted into the center ring, you have to have a certain purity and consciousness level. So it kind of appears that the once consciousness gets into a little farther from that center source, seems to start to feel fear more and resource oriented, and in this hierarchical structure of control and domination, and which is exactly what we're working with, the same within these individuals who are in our experiences right now and attempting to, you know, maintain that, you know, canopy of control over us. So the ant people then are going on to meeting the lizard people that were also created. And then I really like the way you differentiated between what also takes place all throughout here is there is supposed to be a natural that you're expressing, like genetic hybrid type creation happening that works towards soul evolution and experience here in form in different consciousness, but that the negative factions, what you refer to as the lower lords, they move into underground positions, which I'd like to talk about a little bit more. And then they begin to genetically modify and interfere with the more, as you referred to it, as a tantric conscious birthing, so that the old ways birth consciousness that was at a higher level in order to maintain peace and harmony. But when they interfere with the genetics, they came along, and they are who is more referred to as more like the reptilian species, the draconian reference, which a couple other people have also talked about in the shows. And they apparently have grudge with the Star Elders in a sense, because they always seem to be battling for a false control of the world and initiating these false matrices versus the natural progress. So they come in, they genetically modify, and then that introduces lower consciousness that comes into vehicles that isn't supposed to happen that way. So did I sort of frame that correct in how you sort of stated that in your book? And do you want to add to that?
Yeah. The reptilian are like the next step of evolution, and they again they have great time of enlightenment. They have a very advanced civilization. There's a lot of the very ancient pyramids that are left on this planet that they built. Megalithic structures, and some bigger than anything humans ever built, that very often are considered as mountains. But if you look at them, they're pyramids. There are some of those several locations, but especially on the east side of the Grand Canyon, I saw a whole complex of those pyramids, which probably a square mile, and every direction around you look, you can see more. So it's all there, hidden in the open, but unknown, because mainstream academics or archaeology would not accept that, simply because it's older than us. It doesn't fit in our scale, because it certainly doesn't. But it's part of this planet's history. I went to one of those sites in Northeast Washington, actually. There's pyramids there that near Chihuahua that are known. There's been medicine people, at least one who went there and identified there was a reptilian people living under it. Just like in the Grand Canyon, there are still some ant people and some lizard people living there. And the natives know about that. There are also a lot of spaceships flying by. But in that place I went, Northeast Washington, where there's megalithic walls and gigantic stone heads, things you would not expect in the bush in Washington State. There are many all around the continent and the world, actually, if we look. But in that place, we went there, a small group, and meditated, and I saw that one stone that looked like a reptile face. And I got a message from one of them. And it was one of them who has evolved into higher consciousness. Mm. And he told me, you are pretty much at the same stage, humanity, than we were before our downfall. Using fossil fuel, using chemicals, using nuclear, and all the most harmful technologies. And that's what they did, and caused a lot of mutation and a lot of destruction. But some of them evolved through it and got through in a better consciousness. And that's why he was telling me, he was warning us, that we can go right the same way if we don't take care. So we cannot really judge like, oh, these guys were bad, or they went through that experience. Some learned, some didn't. Some of them are us, because our souls need to reincarnate with somebody. They use what's available. Also, some of their DNA is in us. The Chinese geneticists discovered 265 horizontal genes in humans, in genetics, which means genes that were inserted that didn't come from direct ancestry. That means we're a big melting pot of all kinds of people, including those fish people, those lizard people, the bird people, and the Sasquatch. We all have certain level in the formation of our DNA where they were part of it. Plus other star people we don't even know. So that's why, for instance, just an example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh was an Anunnaki, which means sky person on Earth. They were those tall, 12 feet tall, human-like beings that were also very psychic and very powerful. What they were doing, according to that oldest text of human history, they were going around impregnating virgins to have their own bloodline, having all the firstborns of all families. So they were basically inserting their DNA in everybody. So we all have some Anunnaki DNA today, most likely. So that's why we gotta say, oh, those guys were bad, because we're part of them. We're all one. We just wear different bodies from time to time. It's what the soul is that makes who we are. Yes. So the reptilians, they had to evolve through these stages. It was not a waste, because that experience was transmitted down the line into our genes and soul memories. So that's why I often say we're the outcome of a long lineage. There's been our evolution that didn't start 6 million years ago. It started eons and eons, even before the Earth was created. Our ancestors go way, way far back.
Okay, well, that's interesting, yes, and very expansive and opening, and certainly what we all need to hear. I like that. It feels very good and starts to put definitely a lot more understanding as to our unique diversity and the amount of different perspectives on history that we all need to be a little bit more open to because of the fact that we have come from so many different paths to where we're at right now. And it certainly answers how different people have different likings. You know, someone likes the water very much, someone likes the land much more. And if you have come from in your DNA this more particular route, then you would, you know, tend to feel more comfortable in a different medium. Interesting. So, you're in your book, you go through then that you the progression then after the reptilian was to produce the Sasquatch type people then, and I believe the elder said that this was about 50 million years ago that his species began. Is that approximately correct? They're about 50 million years ago.
It's actually they were already well established. They were at that time. We have fossil that show go up to 300 million years of human-like footprints.
Oh, okay.
The Sasquatch were not only on this planet, just
Okay.
like the others. You know, like there's not only lizard or ant people on Earth. It's part of a larger group through the cosmos. So
Okay.
the Sasquatch, through hundreds of millions of years, they have come to Earth before really becoming indigenous. Because when they decided to settle here and make this their own planet. So that's when they use Earth genetics to become indigenous.
Okay.
But there are Sasquatch types beings that are from other places. There's actually it's one of the, I'm not sure if it's the fourth or fifth, but it's one of the humanoid types that is often observed. Maybe not among the top, but not too far down. I think it's like 20% of encounters. The hairy humanoids. There are tall ones, there are small ones, there are different morphologies. Some look much more human, some look much more ape-like, we can say, or lemur-like, like muzzle. So again, over all these ages of evolution and different environment, including different planets, they became a very vast class of what we call the Sasquatch or hairy humanoids. I believe in my next book, that's what I use the most, hairy humanoids. I think it's the most accurate term to describe those beings, that class of beings. Because, well, one thing for sure, we don't know if they're hominids or even homins or likely primates, but there's no place in the Darwinian charts for them. Why? Or for us, because we're the two only species of that had their DNA tested on this planet, Sasquatch and the humans, that have spliced genes. that means that we have been manipulated genetically. That doesn't happen in nature, honestly. So we have proof, clear proof that we're implanted here. And it's not too hard to believe when we realize that we need clothing. We can't live without it. We need fire. We need shoes. We need houses. We need nowadays we need all kind of device because we can't live without it. So we're still not adapted. I mean, probably some tribes in the past were much closer to nature. We still need all those external support that no other animals do, including the Sasquatch, because they were implanted as scouts and caretakers, very much to be self-sufficient, autonomous, though, to need nothing at all, not even fire or clothing. They're much better adapted than we are to this planet.
Yes, and you know, I did forget to a little step in there, but in between the reptilian and the Sasquatch, there was also the bird people. So actually in between there, and I love the way you referenced that the birds were simply developing then. So after one of the great mass extinctions, then the birds began to develop on the planet after many millions of years again. And different consciousness stepped in and moved bird people into our existence here, and that they had wings and they were more compassionate. So that started sort of a need, especially between the fighting that was happening between different factions and the potential big trouble that was going to be caused, and then, you know, another mass extinction taking place. There needed to be more compassion here, and that the bird people brought that in. So I did want to mention that they were in between there, previous to the Sasquatch, and then the Sasquatch goes into human. What not goes into, but I mean the next stage is that that is introduced is our human type vehicles. And then of course we have been genetically modified throughout time, that so we are a little bit down from where we would have been if we weren't interfered with, but a lot of our genetics has been interfered with. And then progression here, it appears that we are heading towards another evolutionary leap. Are they talking about that? Is Sasquatch aware of that? Is that something? I know that we are on the danger of another mass extinction, which always seems to come around at a point when we're ready to take a big leap. And this heading towards 2020, especially in the next years after this, seems to be a very prominent time frame and lineup where there is more of a potential for travel between the different dimensions to start taking place more often, or at least in this big event. But someone else has presented it as being, a couple other people have presented it in a reference that in a very natural occurrence, there is big plasma type event, solar and plasma event that takes place that helps to upgrade our DNA. So basically turning on some of this ancient DNA, this, you know, that's within us that isn't activated, and that people who are ready, who are a little more healthier on the physical level and pure on the other level of heart, will tend to pick up more like supernatural type skills, for human even maybe. The DNA come on within them, while at the same time it looks like that may try to be interfered with when it happens by doing a fake alien invasion and such, that when the portals are open, they're going to travel maybe some of the elites to another dimension, because then they would be able to, etc. So is this being talked about? Anything like that is upcoming within what you're receiving, or even with Native Americans? Because I would like also the audience to understand that you have been accepted into a very large number of Native American tribes. As would they refer to you as an oral tradition or history keeper? Am I saying that correctly? Is that how they would refer to you? Okay. So I want everyone to know that you in an unusual position have been received via you being contacted by Sasquatch, um, and very well respected within the Native American tribes. So is this being talked about, and what are you hearing? I know that the Native Americans, of course, are talking about stay close to nature, ride with nature. She's going to give the signs. And of course, we are seeing buffalo and things like that. But what else are you hearing about it in the circles?
Yeah. Well, the oldest form of spirituality, which some would say it's also the oldest form of science, it's shamanism. Shamanism, which basically it's a generic word created by anthropologists to talk about what we could call medicine people, healers, seers, visionaries, basically people who are gifted with spiritual gifts, bridge the human world with the spirit world. Spirit is it's a synonym of consciousness. Spirit is more like from a spiritual perspective, but science will say consciousness in quantum physics, which confirms just about everything shamanism has been teaching, that our thoughts have this an intention, have this power to create and to transform matter and reality. So basically, this ancient universal knowledge that shamans have carried through since the ages of humanity, the dawn of ages, is re-emerging now because our materialistic society has lost this knowledge, and it's what we're finding back with our latest discoveries, that was right. They were right all along. Spirit exists. It's even the essence of existence. Nothing exists without consciousness. So Max Planck was in the 40s. That's already a while back. I wasn't born, but it's still slowly getting into our collective consciousness that, oh, it's not all about particles. We're not just a bunch of particles, although many people still believe that. They can be proven wrong now with science. But shamans, they don't necessarily need to prove anything, they just practice. They practice with the knowledge they get, or they gain, or they were taught through teaching or experience or ceremony. So humanity itself has been through previous cycles and destructions. According to the many ancient cultures, like the Hopi, the Hindu, Tibetan, and others, like at the end of the fourth world or age of humanity, which means there were cleansing and mass extinction events in our own history. We survived because we were not done. But at this point in time, we have the means to basically exterminate at least ourselves from the face of the planet, without being yet able to save us on another planet. There's major threats to humanity right now. First is the environmental crisis, which is not a random problem. It's something caused. It's something that's created daily by corporations and institutions and governments and people supporting these to destroy not only our environment but our future. That is the most crucial. Everyone who has consciousness on this planet will acknowledge, even to the UN, they have to address it now, because that's the crucial issue. If we don't solve this in this generation, there's not much chance our civilization will survive. Maybe humans will, but it will be a different reality, which is quite possibly what might happen, according to many prophecies and trends. There are other threats. That one is transhumanist agenda, because they kind of mirror this to us that we got the technology, we'll have the technology to take care of pollution and overpopulation and all the problems we're causing now. Instead of addressing them and taking care of them, they tell us, well, one of the solutions will be to get rid of humans, transform them into machines, transform their consciousness into computer programs, and then we won't need, they even claim that they won't need biological life to continue civilization. At one point, the transhumanist agenda, all this millions of years of DNA evolution is unnecessary for them. It's like all these genetic memories we carry and the soul, they're out of the equation for them. They just want a world tailor-made and for their own expectations, which is profit at all costs. So that's a very great threat also that humanity is facing, because those guys are not just a handful of weirdos. They are the top-ranking billionaires controlling the industry and the economy. So they have the power to push that agenda. We have the power not to go along. But what can likely occur, what the Sasquatch tell me might likely occur, and it has happened before, that humanity might take two roads. There is a split happening. It's either we love this planet and we love life and we want to take care of it, or we just don't care and we scrap it for a quick gain. And these two ways will not be able to coexist forever, because one is sustainable and one is not. So the unsustainable way will sooner or later vanish, unfortunately, probably with a lot of chaos and destruction, but it is by definition unsustainable. So they will come up with robots and with all kind of stuff like that, but it's not gonna last. It's not gonna be our future. Maybe the future of some who choose that path. So that's what the Sasquatch tell me right now, that these are the main challenges that we face, that we must address, and that are urgent, that are very crucial. It's not like a if or maybe or another example, for instance, part of it is the 5G that's coming up. It's just one tool in the implementation of the transhumanist agenda, but that's a very powerful tool to destroy environment, kill birds and bees, do direct mind control. It's a weapon. It's a very dangerous weapon. So the others are the things as humanity we should face and address like now. And the other thing is any kind of mind control. That's how those they call the lower lords. It gave me this term lower lords because we cannot say someone's totally good or totally evil, but there's a range or a scale of frequencies and between beneficial and harmful. People or entities that are actively involved into harmful activities, which means covert means, mind control, violence, and all that. They are in a very low frequency. They might be very powerful, very psychic, very smart, but their energy is in a very low level of. So we call them the lower lords. Lords because they control people, they control institutions, and they have some power. They're not overlords. They're not like on top of us. They're just doing their thing on the side. They have a lot of influence. We don't have to follow them. But these are, it's also very important that we undo this mind control, this programmation that we've been subjected to since birth, because that's how they keep their control. That's how they can push all those towards the destruction, the enslavement. So the only way to the control is through mind control. So the way to free ourselves is to free our mind, our consciousness, to understand this is just a game. This is, I mean, basically it's a theater. It's a play. It's just a phase, a very long evolution. It's not. We're not doomed. It's not the end of it. It's not the outcome or the goal of it. It's just this time we have to go through to learn to solve big problems and big challenges, so we can be able to solve bigger later. So those are the main instructions they tell me is basically it's all about taking care of our karma, and we cannot. I mean, it starts individually. We have to start healing our own karma and problems and repair the wrongs we did, reorient our lives and thoughts. But this is just the beginning, because it does not take care of our neighborhood or our planet. It helps. I mean, that's where it started. Once we got started on this healing path, then we are called to become healers, not just of our own, but of wherever healing is needed. And there's so much healing needed on this planet right now that there's no, I mean, there's never too many people working on healing. So that's the great mission. We are called to also to bring the great healing, to free the consciousness, to bring the awareness and understanding of who we really are, what's our purpose here, and where are we heading, without being misled like a sheep to the slaughterhouse.
Yes.
So it's a consciousness awakening. It's all about
and
our spirits.
And certainly if we took that route with more people on board in the collective peak numbers altogether, we could utilize our minds, I believe, to much more quickly disintegrate this, disassemble what has been created, let that, fall as needs to, and reassemble ourselves much more quickly with an open-mindedness, love in our hearts, and utilizing, you know, our tech and our abilities the right way, I believe we could clean it up much more quickly. It's just a matter of if that, you know, becomes allowed. People are changing themselves so dramatically. Let's say someone cleans up their diet. Well, the transformation that people are going through would look miraculous to people in the past. They wouldn't believe that changing your diet could do that type of a miracle for you physically. So with little changes, big progress can be made. So to encourage people to, yes, make this big leap to take your consciousness back from the control. It just seems that they have managed to get enough consciousnesses of a lower level into many human vehicles here who apparently believe in that it's a very good idea to work transhumanism and artificial intelligence into the picture. And for those of us, it seems, who have either been here before, who have reincarnated again, come into these lower levels to assist with this, we have this natural feeling about it, because it's just a feeling that we go, oh, it's not a good idea. And to, you know, we seem to be able to automatically understand that to mimic technically that you have the ability to do if you develop with it within yourself, because we were granted just incredible telepathic, psychic, paranormal, you know, teleportation, everything. We have those abilities within us to do, but they're not turned on. And the more that we utilize technology as the means of it, the less we use our true abilities and turn on. So there seems to be just a natural feeling for those of us who have seen this happen before and are here to try to, you know, hold these anchoring places for people who are maybe on the verge, you know, and just get up enough information into their awareness so that they go, wait a minute, maybe that's not such a good idea. Because definitely once the route is taken, it's a devolution. But again, no judgment, experience. I think the judgment just comes in that it's hard for us, one, to see people who are walking into harm's way, and two, the more people that fall prey to this thinking and this mind control makes it harder on those people who are here and who are trying to step up and do the right thing. So we are nearing then, and it looks like we summarized a lot in the show, the end of the show here. So that was great. I absolutely loved it. I loved how you were able to answer much more specific questions that came up as I was reading the book and put a little different, bigger picture in there. So very, very profound information. I would like now to have you tell the audience about your book, how they can purchase your book. And you have also different psychic Sasquatch spiritual retreats. You also manage 4 different pages. So how can people come and become involved with your work and connect up with you and learn more about you?
Right. Well, I have a website, scenicsasquatch.com. Scenic, SCENIC, stands for Sasquatch Close Encounter Network for Interspecies Communication. We promote a peaceful spiritual approach in communication with other species. So far, well, it's been a year for the website. So far, there's been about 200 people who have shared their experiences in interspecies communication. There's all kind of information as well about articles, links, and books and videos and stuff. My books are the Sasquatch Message to Humanity. It's a series of 3 titles now. The first one is a conversation with Elder Kamooh. Second one is interdimensional teachings from our elders. And the third one is it's a collaboration of 10 co-authors, international, that channel Sasquatch people, messages from the Sasquatch. It's called Earth Ambassadors Cooperation. So these books can be found on Amazon. The links are on my website. I'm working on a new book that should be out this summer. And I haven't announced it yet, but I guess I can say it's going to be called Hairy Humanoids from the Wild, which is going to be an encyclopedia of all things Sasquatch, covering from native ancestral tradition, history, colonial reports, modern research, into paranormal and psychic phenomena.
Oh, how wonderful. Very, very nice. Looking forward to that. And then you also have 4 different pages that you manage. Can you just give us the names of those pages? Now, the names of your Facebook pages. What are the names of your? Yes, because you manage a couple of different groups, and you can. I know that I reached you through Sasquatch people. I reached you through SunBow TrueBrother, and then you also have by your name. Is it Jean Letellier? How do you pronounce?
Yeah, that's my profile. People can look at our scenic Facebook page, where we keep up with everything on the website. There's the Sasquatch Message to Humanity Facebook page. There's the Sasquatch People, so another one I admin. There's the Psychic Sasquatch Spiritual Retreat, which is our annual international event in Chihuahua. It's going to be the 4th year. So those are the pages that I'm on team. There's other groups like the Spiritual Sasquatch and Wisdom from Our Elders. And my main group is One United Nation for the Great Earth Peace, which is going on 10 years. It's a global network for environment and peace and spirituality.
Yes, okay. So you have a very big retreat coming up. I think that is in September. This 4th Sasquatch Psychic Retreat is in September. Okay, so people can find out about that on your site also. And a question just popped into mind. Now, as we go into also those of us who move into a higher consciousness state and kind of don't devolve with what the suggestions are to take place here. Do you expect, and are they saying that sightings of Sasquatch are going to increase? Now, they are in a 4th dimensional reality as opposed to we're in 3rd dimensional reality, and then they are able to, for a period of time, sustain a little bit of their presence here. But generally, they're in a frequency bandwidth that is just slightly outside of our frequency bandwidth. So, and we tend to see, I was talking about those teepee structures. So in my dream, I had never read about that before, so that the audience who may be new to this understands why I even said that at the beginning, was that the portals they move through, they usually utilize branches set in a teepee pattern in order to travel interdimensionally. And I had never known about that before when I received the dream. So obviously that came either in a memory or it was happening within that certain time frame, as you know, I was maybe in a certain place and reached at that time. Luckily reached out, and that's how I'm here with you today, because of that connection way back then. Can we expect that this is to continue to increase? Is that what you're seeing, that it's continuing to increase? Okay, and are they intending on, do you think at some time in the future, like a Star Wars, you know, Chewbacca type character? Are we going to have, do you think, in a future, we are going to return to that type of an existence where they will be in our reality with us? Yes? Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the best outcome we can hope for.
The best.
We're actually in a phase where they are reaching out, the Sasquatch people, as well as the Star Elders, because first of all, we can use all the help we're doing as a whole species. We're doing a bad job with our planet, so they're kind of monitoring, watching, but they also offer the help, their support. We can use a lot. Their wisdom, advice. We can learn a lot. One of their teaching is about remembering we are a multidimensional being, and only interdimensionality, understanding of interdimensionality at this point is what can make us evolve. We are pretty much at the top of what materialist science can do. So we have to evolve beyond, otherwise we can be doomed. So yeah, they are reaching out more and more. That's what they said. For me, they told me 4 years ago when I first starting to openly communicate, because I have had encounters for 30 years before that, but I didn't understand. It took me all this evolution to finally realize, yeah, they're there, they want to communicate, and if I go out and I want to meet them, and then they can not only just come and say hi, they can transform my life with their teachings and with the life of others if I carry those teachings. So that's what happened to me 4 years ago, and then it went from knowing nobody who knew Sasquatch, maybe a couple of friends I had heard before, thinking I couldn't speak to anybody about it, to 1 week later being in a medicine circle with elders talking about it, international gathering, to having more encounter and meeting people who have encounters, until we created a Facebook page, another one, a group. The books went out, the international growing audience, and more people who I can say pretty much daily, almost. If it's not every day, it's every couple of days at the most, that I get someone new who comes to tell me about the Sasquatch encounter or communication. Online or everywhere I go, I talk with people. So it is definitely very fast, very growing exponentially, with more and more people at this time. Most people, experiencers, I know, it started within the last years, 2, 3. Some had, no, there's always been. But now it's like a wave. It's like this information is coming out. They're coming out to us. They're waiting for us to open up and to learn, so we can work together and make the world better. And when will be the critical mass will be strong enough, because they are already meeting some people. When there'll be, and I've had experiences where we had group encounters. A few of us meet a few of them. But once the more we walk on that path, the more it will become a common thing. And people will understand that, we're not alone. We're not the top of the universe. We're just a link in the chain.
Yes, that's beautiful, and very happy note to look forward to, indeed, to continue with that. Wow, SunBow, thank you so much. That was beautifully expansive, absolutely expansive, and helps with so many little different pieces of the puzzle fitting in. So I thank you so much for your time and taking, this opportunity here to talk with us, to add your information to this series, Our Altered Histories. And I will say good night now to my listening audience, and I will be announcing the next show as to who's going to be coming up next. And I will definitely keep in touch with you. Thank you so much, and good night.
Very much.
Okay.
Sorry.
Bye-bye.